After finally winning his home race of the Monaco Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc and his Ferrari team now head to the Montreal racetrack in the time, looking to get back-to-back victories for the first time in many a season. And I am firmly in the camp that Ferrari have the tools and capabilities of doing so. And this is for a number of reasons. Of course, we'll be getting into those very shortly, but before we do, I'm running a competition on the channel up until the first practice session of the Canadian Grand Prix. And you have the chance of winning this Ferrari Schedoni leather kind of goods. All you have to do to be with a chance of winning is being subscribed to the channel, liking this video and commenting down below in it. Good luck, and the winners will be announced in the first practice session in a fortnight's time. But as I was saying, I fully expect Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari SF24 to excel around the circuit in Canada, and this is for a number of different reasons. Number one, of course, primarily is the current package that the SF24 is in. The Evo upgrade which they brought to the Imola Grand Prix weekend has given them a huge trajectory and leap forward in performance, getting them on par with the likes of McLaren and Red Bull. As we saw last time out in circuit and the Canadian circuit, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Number one, there's a lot of slow corners on both circuits. And of course, if you take what happened last time out in Monaco, Ferrari excelled around it. And then secondly, there's a lot of curb riding, and the Ferrari car is exceptionally good on that particular kind of aspect. Now, with the circuit in Canada being very similar in this way in having the majority of their corners either in the slow speed or medium speed category, two areas Ferrari excel at, this should give them the perfect opportunity and window to set up the SF24 within. And there's an article on the Formula Uno website today which kind of elaborated a bit more on why the Ferrari car is very strong. But at certain moments on certain tracks, they have to give up a bit of their slow speed corner performance. And we'll be getting into that right now. So, of course, throughout the speed ranges of the corners, this generation of car cannot really excel across all three of them at the same time. And for every individual track you go to, you have to really set the car up for what is the majority of the speed corners at that track. So if there's more high speed or medium speed corners, you set the car up naturally around that. Whereas if the track is leaning more towards having slow to medium speed corners, you set it up around that. And that's what the kind of compromise every team does. And so these last two circuits, Ferrari have been able to kind of maximize the setup in a much more slow speed and medium speed orientated kind of setup for the cars, and that's really allowing them to excel across the Monaco weekend. Of course, Monaco is all about traction, braking, balance, and of course slow speed corners, and as such they're not having to compromise how they set the cars up. And this played a huge dividends for them at Monaco. And if we look at some of the kind of sector times where there's a lot of slow speed corners, they excelled across the board. And even if they weren't quickest, they were within half a tenth or even less than half a tenth of the quickest time. So it makes perfect reasoning to think they would be able to carry this form into the Montreal weekend. And I fully expect them to do so. And we can't forget, Ferrari have an upgrade plan in store for the SF24 for quite a few of the upcoming races. So they could quite easily bring upgrades to the Jules Villeneuve circuit as well. This plan is in place up until the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, where they will be introducing their next major upgrade package to the SF24. And the target with it is to increase the qualifying efficiency of the car for both Leclerc and Sainz. This goal, of course, would be further boosted by the fact that Red Bull have correlation issues and, of course, the huge financial implications of the Perez crash at the hands of Magnussen last time out, which cost the team between £2 to £3 million. This, of course, also has a bearing on their ability to bring upgrades to the RB20, with one insider stating that the final upgrade that they have in place for the end of the season might now have to be scrapped. Now, of course, off the back of last year, with which Ferrari would have identified all the weaknesses of last year's car, the SF23, they made loads of changes coming into this year with the aim of achieving the targets they set. Now, one of those, of course, would have been the weakness of their race pace last year. Now, while the SF23 might have been extremely good in qualifying, as we saw on many an occasion, being on average very close to Red Bull and the RB19, when it came to race pace, they were a mile off them and would always fall back into the clutches of, like, say, McLaren and Aston Martin and Mercedes. Now, this is the area of which they identified they needed to improve on with the SF24 dramatically. And they've done so, with them on average being a lot closer to the Red Bull this season. Now, this has, of course, had a impact on the qualifying form, and in a negative manner. And on average now this season, they're between 2 and 4 tenths of a second slower than that of the RB20. Of course, the one outlier and the anomaly of that was last time out at Monaco. But this was for a number of different reasons outside of that. And what Ferrari have an issue with is getting the tyres into the optimum window for that first hot lap in qualifying. Now, of course, this means that the car is a lot gentler on their tyres throughout a race stint, which is, of course, something you need, as you need to be able to manage the temperatures and get it into the right optimum window. And this has enabled them to close the gap dramatically in races, but it's left them on the back foot when it comes to qualifying. And of course, with the lap times being so close between Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari now, albeit like a tenth of a second, the fact that they're starting behind these teams at the beginning of a race is now becoming an issue. And this is why they've identified the area of being able to improve their qualifying performance. Now, what are they actually going to be targeting in terms of the parts or components on their SF24? This is something I cannot tell any of you because we don't actually know. Now, of course, Ferrari will be running simulations in the wind tunnel and through CFD, and they will be obviously, of course, running these with the potential ideas behind which they will then bring upgrades to achieve their goals. And until a news publication brings light to what these are, we cannot say what areas of the car they could be. They could be front wing, they could be brake ducts, they could be the Venturi tunnels, they could be the floor, it could be the side pods. The list goes on and on. So it's a case of just waiting and finding out. So it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamics at play there in Canada and who gets the upper hand on who. Because I think one thing is for certain, all three teams of Ferrari, Red Bull and McLaren will be within maybe a tenth of two of each other in both qualifying and the race. And this could very much play a role in the differing strategies between the top three teams and their 6 drivers. I think, as we always see around the Canada circuit, you can have a different change in strategy. You can go for a 2-stop, a 1-stop, or potentially a 3-stop. And of course, we also have the additional outside kind of interference of whether the rain is there or whether, red flags. And I think it's just going to be a really interesting weekend. And I think, as we saw in Imola with Red Bull, when they didn't try the hard tyre in the practice sessions, it left them extremely vulnerable to the likes of Norris throughout that final stint in the race. And with the circuit being that much different from Imola, and we know overtaking around the Canada circuit is a lot easier, we could see multiple passes for the lead throughout the race, and of course in the pit stop phases with the undercut as well. So it should make for a very, very fascinating, and hopefully for our sake, after Monaco, an exciting Grand Prix. But that is the video, guys. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like, subscribe down below and comment in this video. And I'll catch you all in another video very shortly this week.